Should your rabbits be housed inside or outside? For the summer months, either is okay as long as your rabbits are protected from predators, they can get away from the wind, sun, and rain, and the housing is easy to keep clean and dry. This is an ideal setup for having your rabbits outside in the summer. The cage is all wire, which allows for easy cleaning and good ventilation. Never consider making your outside cage of chicken wire. Wild animals and stray dogs will pull it apart in no time. Put your cages up 3 or 4 feet off the ground, again for wild animal purposes, and perhaps put an extra lock on the door as a precaution against the door springing open. The steel on the roof provides shade and protection from the rain, and the solid partition at the back provides for a very good windbreak. Rabbits can't take extreme heat, remember, so make sure they have protection from the hot sun. Any rabbits which occupy this cage in the summer are very happy and healthy. If you are serious about raising rabbits and want to breed your does year-round, you will need a building to house your herd. I raise my rabbits in the bottom part of this older barn. It is partially in the ground, so it stays reasonably cool in the summer and fairly warm in the winter. We divided the barn into 3 sections. The first section is where my breeding herd is located. There are windows on the east, south, and west walls for natural lighting and ventilation. The fryers are in the second section. This area only has 1 window, so the room is a little darker, but still has more than enough light to keep the rabbits healthy and happy. Also in this section is a room where shavings, hay, and straw for nest boxes is kept. And the third section of the barn is where my horses live. I sometimes hang extra cages in this part if I require additional temporary housing. My cages run lengthwise with 1 center aisle and are far enough away from the wall to allow easy access to the backs of the cages. I suggest that you use cages made only of welded wire, no wooden floors, and definitely no chicken wire. Wire cages are easiest to keep clean, therefore your rabbits will have a clean, dry, well-ventilated home. Popular cage sizes for meat rabbits are 24 by 30, 24 by 36, and 30 by 36. Cage wire comes in different gauges or thicknesses. 14 gauge is thicker and more durable than 16 gauge wire, and therefore it is also more expensive. Wire also comes in 2 finishes. Wire that is galvanized before welding is thinner, shinier, less durable, and less expensive. Wire that is galvanized after welding is thicker and will last longer. The preferred wire for rabbit cages is 1 by 1 squares for the 4 sides and the roof, and half by 1 squares for the floor. Baby saver wire should be used for the sides of doe cages. This has smaller squares for the bottom 3 or 4 inches. This feature ensures that stray babies won't get their heads caught in the wire. The door opening should be large enough to handle your largest nest box and rabbit. The doors can swing either way or flop down. My buck cage doors flop down. I find this very convenient for breeding does. If you decide to build your own cages, you can either purchase the wire in rolls or buy cage kits. Your local feed store will probably carry both. The kit will have the wire pre-cut. All you have to do is clip it together. To assemble a cage, you need a pair of J-clip pliers and some J-clips. Begin with the floor. Put the half-inch strands of wire up. This gives the rabbit more wire to walk on and will put a spring rather than a sag on the floor. Attach the 4 walls 1 by 1. The vertical 1-inch wire should be on the outside of the cage. Place the J-clips every 3 or 4 inches apart, always having clips at all corners. Attach the roof and voila, your cage is finished. It takes about 10 minutes to put a pre-cut cage together. You can suspend your cages from the ceiling in single tiers and let the droppings fall on the floor, or in multiple tiers, in which case drop boards are used to keep the manure from falling on the rabbits below. You can also use cages with drop trays. This is my setup. The cages sit on a rack and each cage has a tray under it. In the tray is bedding, either sawdust or shavings. In the spring I use peat moss and empty the trays directly onto the flower beds and gardens. This tray setup works well for me. It is more labor intensive than letting the manure pile up on the floor, but there are advantages. The trays get cleaned frequently, so the rabbit barn always smells good and there is never a buildup of ammonia. The trays catch excess water from the waterers also, so the barn floor stays dry. This helps to keep the humidity down. Most of the supporting uprights are metal and the cages sit on pipe. The pipes stay reasonably clean as most rabbits do their business in the back corner of their cage. This is a wooden rack that we made. We put vinyl siding on areas that might come in contact with the urine. This rack is still quite simple to keep clean. If you decide to make racks like this, ensure that each tier is at a height that is easily accessible. My cages are all singles. This makes them easy to remove for cleaning. And if a first-time doe is nervous about kindling, you can put a temporary partition between the cages to give her a bit of privacy. Always watch out for drafts in your rabbits. This old barn is not airtight by any means, so I put fiberglass panels on the tops of the cages and also around any sides where I feel there might be a draft. You will require some kind of ventilation in your barn to control ammonia buildup. Ammonia makes the barn an unpleasant place to be, both for you and the rabbits. Ventilation means bringing in fresh air from outside, mixing it with the stale air already in the barn, and moving it back out again. Ventilation controls ammonia, controls humidity, and controls the temperature in your barn. In the summer, I rely on natural ventilation most of the time. I just open up the windows and let the breezes flow through. When natural ventilation isn't keeping the air clean enough, I then use this ventilation fan, running it manually from a switch 2 or 3 times a day. Since I keep the manure removed from under the cages, this is adequate to keep the air clean and fresh. In order to get proper air intake, you'll need to almost close the windows. In the winter, this small crack allows enough air to be drawn into the barn for complete air exchange. Put screens on your windows to keep out birds and other unwanted guests, not just horses, but cats, dogs, and wild predators also. You're going to notice that I use several different types of feeders in my barn. When I first started in rabbits, I bought some used equipment, people gave me feeders, and I've also bought new feeders. They all work well. This is the most commonly used one. It's a J feeder. It's got a perforated bottom, which sifts some of the fines out. This is also a J feeder, but it's got a full screen back and bottom, which really allows the fines of the feed to sift out. This is called the flush feeder. It hangs totally on the outside of the cage. It gives the doe a little bit of extra floor space and is designed to keep the food from being scratched out of the feeder. A crock also makes an excellent feeder. You have to open the cage door each time you feed, but this allows you to observe your rabbits closely each day. J feeders get dirty and you don't really notice since you fill them from the outside. With crocks, if it's dirty, you notice. I have lots of spare crocks, so it's easy to replace a soiled one with a clean, disinfected one. I also like crocks because they're portable. It's easy to add an extra one to a cage of a doe and litter to ensure that they always have plenty of food. Your rabbits must always have plenty of clean water. I don't really recommend crocks for this purpose. You have to refill them all the time, and the water doesn't stay very clean. This is a common method of watering rabbits. It's a stainless steel drinker attached to a bottle. This drinker usually comes with a plastic bottle, but if something happens to that plastic bottle, it fits equally well on a large pop bottle. The trick to filling these bottles is when you're screwing on the cap and turn it upside down to give it a shake, and that builds up the vacuum. See the air bubbles? Now this drinker won't leak, and all your rabbit has to do is dislodge this ball with his tongue. I prefer these top fill bottles. You don't have to take them off the cage except to clean them. If you attach a water filler to your hose, watering becomes a quick and easy chore. Because I like to know how much water my rabbits drink, I haven't opted for an automatic watering system. Another very necessary piece of equipment is the nest box, as your doe will need one 28 days after she's been bred. There are several types available on the market to purchase, or you can build them yourself. I use exclusively nest boxes with pegboard bottoms, as this allows for very good drainage and also makes them very easy to disinfect. This is the type of nest box that I myself use most of the time. It's steel, has no rough edges, is very easy to clean. This nest box measures 15 inches, it's 7 inches high, and it's 9 inches across. I have several other nest boxes very much like it, a little larger. Some are larger, some are smaller. I try to match the nest box to the size of the doe. This is another style of nest box available. Slightly different shape, still easy to disinfect, and some does, especially Californians, seem to prefer it. Since it is not cut lower at the front, it keeps the babies in longer. This is a wooden nest box that I also use. The advantage of this wooden nest box is that it's warmer in winter and it's not so easily tipped by a heavy doe. The disadvantage of wood is that it's much more difficult to disinfect and dry, especially in the winter, and also does will chew it. Some people use nest boxes that hang on the outside of the cage, which gives the doe more floor space. The box hangs in the door opening. To check the kits, just lift up the sliding door. Some does get nervous and very bothered when you remove the nest box to check their babies. With this type of box, you can peek without disturbing her. This is why I like pegboard bottoms. Look at how much moisture has drained into the tray from the nest box in a 24-hour period. If this moisture isn't allowed to drain through, your nest box will become very wet and dirty. You'll notice that pegboard has two sides, a smooth side and a rough side. When you're putting the pegboard in the nest box, ensure that you put the rough side up. That will allow the babies a bit of traction when they do start to move around at a couple weeks old in the nest box. If you put the smooth side up, it may be slippery and you may end up with a case of splay leg. Although pegboard allows for good drainage, it also allows drafts in the winter. So I take a thin piece of foam, I put it under the nest box, and then we build the nest on top of that. When the babies are about 3 days old, then I remove this foam, and it allows nest box to have good drainage again.